In 2019, a number of tech startups went public through initial public offerings, IPOs, and saw their valuations plummet almost immediately afterwards, raising questions about the accuracy of their pre-IPO financial disclosures. The list of failures is long and includes Magic Leap, a virtual reality startup that raised billions in funding, but ultimately failed to deliver on its promises of revolutionary technology. Nikola, a company that claimed to be developing electric and hydrogen-powered trucks, but was found to have faked a video of a truck driving and to have exaggerated the capabilities of its technology. Hampton Creek, a food company that claimed to have developed a plant-based egg substitute, but was found to have been buying its own products in order to inflate sales figures. Lilly Robotics, a drone company that raised millions in pre-orders for a product that was never delivered, and ultimately went bankrupt. The DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization that raised $150 million in cryptocurrency, but was hacked shortly after its launch and forced to shut down. The list also includes WeWork, who raised billions of dollars in funding from investors and was valued at over $47 billion at its peak. The dark underbelly of Silicon Valley is a tale of deceit, corruption, and betrayal, leaving behind a trail of devastation that has cost billions of dollars. The notorious history of Silicon Valley is rife with scandals and frauds, each one more shocking than the last. From the rise and fall of Theranos, to the high-profile Ponzi scheme of Bernie Madoff, and the deceptive practices of Elizabeth Holmes, it's a story of ambition gone awry and trust betrayed. And while the victims are left counting their losses, the perpetrators continue to move on, driven by greed and a thirst for power. Brace yourself, as we take a glimpse into some of the most infamous tales of deceit and downfall in the Valley. In this episode, we will talk about one such story of fraud and deception. The story of Elizabeth Holmes and her billion-dollar company Theranos. Elizabeth was at one time the world's youngest self-made female billionaire with a net worth of around $4.5 billion. Fortune and Forbes magazines hailed her as a genius entrepreneur, while the world marveled at her TED Talk and her appearances alongside the likes of Bill Clinton and Jack Ma. In this episode, we will walk you through the gripping tale of ambition, greed, and betrayal, and will uncover the truth behind the shocking fraud of Elizabeth Holmes and the hundreds of millions of dollars that were lost by investors and tech entrepreneurs. We will also explore how the intelligent investors and tech entrepreneurs fell for her lies. How can this be prevented in the future? And how does the story of Elizabeth Holmes reflect the risks of investing in tech? Elizabeth Holmes was born on February 3, 1984 in Washington, D.C. Holmes attended Stanford University to study chemical engineering, where she became a President's Scholar. She also interned at the Genome Institute in Singapore. Holmes dropped out of Stanford at the age of 19 and began dating Sunny Balwani, who was 20 years her senior and later became the chief operating officer of Theranos. Elizabeth Holmes had a revolutionary idea. What if blood tests didn't require a needle and vial of blood? What if they only required a simple finger pinprick? It was a breakthrough that could change the face of medical testing forever. With a single drop of blood, a mobile unit could run over 200 tests, delivering swift and accurate results at a fraction of the cost. It was a game-changer for the healthcare industry, promising to bring affordable and accessible diagnostics to even the remotest corners of the world. Imagine the possibilities: diseases detected and treated before they could do any harm, lives saved, and suffering averted. It was a vision of hope, a promise of a brighter future for all. That idea led to the creation of Theranos. Holmes' promise was a bold one. The technology would be able to detect cancer and high cholesterol. It didn't take long for Holmes to attract big-name investors such as Larry Ellison, the founder of Oracle, and Tim Draper, the father of a childhood friend and founder of the prominent venture capital firm Draper Fisher Jurvetson. With the help of these and other investors, Holmes raised more than $700 million for Theranos. Theranos' board included well-known people like George Shultz, Henry Kissinger, Admiral Rough Head, Sam Nunn, and others. It was a boardroom like any other, yet something seemed off. None of them had any experience running a company or a background in medical research. It was an unusual setup for a biotech firm, but no one spoke up. They were spellbound by the young woman at the head of the table. With every word she spoke, she mesmerized them, painting a vivid picture of a revolutionary new technology that could change the world. It was as if she was giving a TED Talk to an audience of laypeople, and they couldn't help but be enraptured by her vision. She raised millions of dollars, yet no one knew how her technology actually worked. For a decade, Theranos operated in stealth mode, with Holmes fiercely guarding every aspect of the company. Investors poured in their money, entrusting her with their funds, but they had no idea what they were investing in. Whenever journalists tried to probe deeper, Holmes would deflect their questions with a rehearsed response. This is what happens when you work to change things, and first they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world. It was a mesmerizing, if not troubling, message, one that left people wondering if they were witnessing the birth of a new era or a masterful con. Despite the murky and secret company operations, the ambitious young CEO of Theranos had a meteoric rise to success. She quickly secured lucrative partnerships with Capital Blue Cross, Cleveland Clinic, Walgreens, and even a secret $350 million deal with Safeway. Her success drove her to the top of Forbes' list of the world's youngest self-made female billionaires, with a net worth of a staggering $4.5 billion. There was a time when Theranos was valued more than Spotify and Uber. Warning signs were raised as early as 2012 by the company's chief scientist, Ian Gibbons, who had warned Holmes that the technology was not ready for public use and had inaccuracies. Outside scientists also expressed their concerns. 3 years later, these concerns about Theranos' bold claims and no results alerted the FDA, who started investigating Theranos. In 2013, Theranos went public with their first prototype with the publicity of over 250 tests from a drop of blood at a fraction of cost as compared to other laboratories. However, except one test called the immunoassays, all other tests were done through Siemens laboratory machines. All of this would make one think that despite the heavy regulated space, how did Theranos get away with their offering? Well, several scientists raised alarm bells, but ironically only a few in the scientific community read those research papers, and no one had the guts to challenge a billion-dollar Silicon Valley startup. It was until John Carreiro of the Wall Street started looking at the development in 2015, when a lot of attention was drawn to Theranos. Followed by several whistleblowers, the company was in trouble. The FDA, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and SEC launched investigations into Theranos in 2016, leading to the company shutting down its lab operations and wellness centers by October of that year. In March 2018, Theranos, its CEO Elizabeth Holmes, and former President Ramesh Balwani were charged with massive fraud by the SEC. As part of a settlement, Holmes was banned from the lab testing industry for 2 years and agreed to pay a $500,000 fine, give up control of Theranos, and return 18.9 million shares of the company's stock. She is also prohibited from serving as a director or officer of a publicly traded company for 10 years. In June 2018, the Department of Justice charged Holmes and her co-defendant Ramesh Balwani with 9 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Despite the charges, Holmes was allowed to stay on as CEO of Theranos, a private company that had been hanging on by a thread. In a desperate attempt to save the sinking ship, Holmes wrote to investors asking for more money, saying, "In light of where we are, this is no easy ask." Unfortunately, Holmes' plea for help was in vain, and in September 2018, Theranos sent an email to shareholders announcing that the company was shutting down. The highly publicized trial of Elizabeth Holmes, former CEO of Theranos, began in September 2021. She was accused of defrauding investors of $144 million. Prosecutors accused Holmes of lying about the capabilities of her company's blood testing technology in order to secure funding and partnerships. The defense argued that while Theranos ultimately failed, the attempt to create a revolutionary product was not a crime. The list of potential witnesses for the trial included notable figures such as Rupert Murdoch, Henry Kissinger, and James Mattis, although only a handful of witnesses ultimately testified over the course of the 11-week trial. Holmes also admitted to adding the logos of pharmaceutical companies to Theranos reports without authorization, leading investors to falsely believe that the technology had been validated by those companies. Holmes stated that she added the logos to convey partnerships, but admitted that she regrets her actions. After a high-profile trial that accused her of lying to investors about the capabilities of her company's blood testing technology. During the trial, Holmes admitted to hiding the fact that Theranos was using modified commercial devices from investors, claiming that company counsel advised her to protect the alterations as trade secrets. In closing arguments, prosecutors argued that Holmes prioritized fraud over the potential failure of her business, while the defense maintained that she was simply trying to build a successful company. Each count against Holmes carried a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison, a $250,000 fine, and the possibility of restitution for victims. On November 18, 2022, Holmes was sentenced to 135 months in prison by a California court, with 3 years of supervised release. The former partner of Holmes, Sunny Balwani, was found guilty on all 12 counts against him and was sentenced to nearly 13 years in prison, with 3 years of probation, in early December. What do you think went wrong with the regulators and investors? How could a 19-year-old college dropout run a $9 billion company without any experience or expertise in labs or engineering? Why didn't anyone ask for any peer-reviewed research to back up Theranos' claims? Were people too scared to challenge a hot Silicon Valley startup? Was it just media hype? Or was it a classic case of fraud where investors were afraid of missing out and jumped on the bandwagon without thinking it through? Please share your views in the comments below, and we will see you next time.